Hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of At the Table. We are back with my sweet friend, Lori McDaniel, for session 2 of Questions on Women in Leadership. And so last episode, if you did not listen, you need to hit pause, go back and listen to it, because it really does kind of set the stage for our conversation on why we're even having these conversations and why women are invited to image God in unique and specific ways. And so make sure that you go back and listen to episode 1. And today we are going to talk a little bit about mentoring, which just throwing that on the table already in that word, it's like, it kind of makes me want to throw up. I don't know, Lori, what does that word make you like think through? What emotive response do you have to the idea of mentoring?
Well, I'm not sure that vomit is what comes to mind, but okay, if that's where you want to go. I see it as a necessary opportunity that often is not utilized.
Okay.
That's what comes to my mind.
That's an optimistic way to put that. So
well,
let me explain maybe why mentoring is maybe a little bit scary, or even just it does have that gag reflex with it. Because for mentoring, I think there is so much pressure to have it all together, have all of the answers, to know exactly you are guiding this person like a Yoda. And if you do it wrong, then you are naturally going to ruin their life. And so there is so much pressure, I think, in the concept, or maybe how it's presented, of being a mentor to someone, that you have to somehow have everything completely figured out, not only in your own life, but then you've got to help them navigate all of the new things that are going on with them. And then I also think maybe there was a time in my life to where I was kind of thrown into a structured, how do I want to describe this? Like a forced mentor relationship that did not go well. And so it was kind of one of those programs in churches, and I got paired with somebody, and it honestly, to be vulnerable, left me feeling very my mentor doesn't even want me, I'm too much of a hot mess for her to even want to have coffee with me, So I think just putting both of those things on the table, both from a mentor perspective and a mentee perspective, there's a lot missing in this conversation. So I'm hoping.
Okay, so this is all new to me. I have never heard you say this.
I know, vulnerable, right? And so, like I said, Marco Polo for the whole world to hear. Here we go. So let's maybe start with, why are these relationships important? I almost want to phrase it not mentoring, but we are going to redeem this word for me. All right. Right here on this episode, mentoring is going to be a good thing. And it is. All right. It is. So let's kind of start rewind and say, why do we need these relationships that maybe are in different life stages, that are very different in people and personalities and all of those things? Why do we even need to talk about this?
Well, let's rewind back even to a few things that you just said, and let's untie some of those knots that maybe exist, and then let's move forward. So, I think, but here's the thing: is I love what you said, because I think it is where a lot of people are. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people think they probably think like you, the word vomit. I literally did not expect you to say that. But there's a self-induced pressure when they think of the word. And I remember the first time I was in a room with some young women, I was probably 37, 38, something like that. And all of a sudden it dawned on me at that moment that I was the oldest in the room. And there is a little bit of a, whoa, wait a second here, because and now I'm even much older than that. That all along, there's these different steps that I think we have this preconceived idea that we're going to arrive at a season in life where we think we have figured it all out. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, spiritually, I'll even say emotionally, physically, every season is new, and this maturation process that God is taking us through to shape us, sanctify us, the whole thing. And so we never arrive, ever. And the thing is, even when you and I meet together, I still have my junk. I don't have all my junk figured out. God is continually revealing these things. And sometimes he uses sisters to sharpen us, like iron sharpens iron, to call some of these things out, which you and I have that relationship. So So first of all, let's get rid of the self-induced pressure. Okay. You're not going to have it figured out. You're just not. There was something else that you said. The disillusionment too. Like you had this experience that sounds like of this systematized, probably a really good effort. And the heart behind it was, pure, and the intentions behind it were good, but the result of it for you wasn't necessarily a good or healthy outcome. And so you've walked away from it thinking, I don't want to go through this again. And so there's a little bit of self-induced pressure and a little bit of disillusionment, both. Yeah. And I don't think either of those need to exist. We're using the word mentoring when it comes to mentoring. But I want to qualify mentoring here a little bit, okay? Because is it mentoring or is it discipleship? Because we're called to go and make disciples, okay? And yet, I will say we women usually tend to lean toward a mentor. I hear young women all the time say, how do I find a mentor? And yet I hear older women say, I don't, like you referred to, like, I can't mentor someone. Like, I'm not even sure how I'm living my life right now. Well, and so here's the thing is I think that you can mentor someone without any discipleship whatsoever. So we could mentor someone on how to do a podcast. We could mentor someone on how to give a TED talk. We could mentor someone on how to pressure cook or whatever. Like you can pick, some kind of area of life. I don't pressure cook, but we can choose a topic. And so you can completely do mentoring without any discipleship. Mm-hmm. But I'm a firm believer. This is what I think and believe, that you can't do discipleship without some element of mentoring. Mm-hmm. And I believe that even when Paul, when he was writing to the church, and I've forgotten in which book it's in now. I want to say it's in Romans, but I may be incorrect. So somebody fact check me on that one. But he says, look, I believe that you're full of goodness and you are full of knowledge. And you are completely able to instruct one another. Like he's not saying, hey, I think you've got it all together. And so now could you go tell other people how you have it all together? What he's saying is he's like, look, you're full of this goodness that God has been working in you. And yeah, it may have been through some really hard times, but you can pull from those experiences. Not that you know everything. You're full of knowledge. Again, those experiences and things that you've encountered that God has been teaching you, and now you can instruct others. And it's not that he's saying now you're center stage. He's saying now you can journey along with someone in their walk and help them to see how God walked with you through these things. So you're in this process making God center stage, not yourself as the mentor. Mm-hmm. I'm not even sure if I answered your question. I think I just kind of started answering your question and then went off.
And I think it is I don't know where we get it to where it's like we have this picture of how it's supposed to go. And then when it doesn't go that way, or when I don't have the answer, or we're failing at it, then we retreat back. And so I love how you are breaking it down into this is a discipleship process, and disciple making. Being a disciple literally means you're a learner, like the whole way. Like there is no graduation from being learners. And so we get to apprentice under Jesus. We get to learn from him constantly, that whole process of sanctification. And so really the idea of discipleship and mentoring and being able to share lives with one another is sharing, hey, this is where God has me. This is where God is showing me and teaching me and allowing other people, kind of similar to what we talked about last episode, that you're not doing this thing alone, that you've got other people alongside you that are able to point to the way that God is working, the way that God has worked, is working, going to work, hope, faith, all of the things, right? And so, I don't know, maybe we make it a little bit more convoluted and hard than, although I don't know, I'm trying to decide right now if I want to be taught on how to pressure cook. I didn't even know that was like a
I don't know if it's a thing or not, but I'm sure I know it is because people make jelly and all that kind of stuff, right? Here's the thing is what we're talking about is, let me put it very blunt.
Do it.
Is we can't shirk our responsibility to equip others for the work in the kingdom of God. We cannot. And I know in Ephesians, when Paul is writing in chapter 4, and he's writing to pastors and the structure of the church and pastors and elders and so on and so forth, that's the context which this next verse comes in. But he talks about, equipping the saints for the work of ministry. And he continued building up the body of Christ. But he continues on in that last phrase that he says that they are growing up into maturity, to which Christ basically is the standard. And so that's a lot of responsibility, yes. But as a follower of Christ, this is what Jesus was doing when he called his disciples to come and follow him. In Mark, it says that he called them, the apostles, he called them so that he could be close to them, so that ultimately he could send them out to preach. So he could say he called them to be close to him, so he could commission them. And so Jesus models this. Yes, we can go to Paul and we can go to Paul and Timothy. We could look at Moses and Joshua. We could look at Naomi and Ruth. We see these modeled, but let's just go to Jesus here. And everything that he did with his disciples was to equip and to train for the work of ministry, for them to carry it on out. So I need a mentor in my life. I crave that, someone who can speak into my life and so forth. But I also ought to be, I'll say discipling, but I know we're using the word mentoring. I also ought to be doing that myself with those behind me. So it's not that I'm in the leadership position and it's all about what I'm accomplishing and doing and so on and so forth, but how I'm raising up those behind me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is probably going to be a little bit of a rabbit trail, but even going back to that Ephesians passage, that it reminds me of, so many people think of that in, okay, well, that's my pastor's job. My pastor or my church staff is supposed to train me, disciple me, equip me. And so I love that you're taking that, rightfully so, and taking it into, no, this is believer. You are to be equipping. You are to be making disciples. Everyone, male and female, are to be bringing other people along to grow in the faith, to grow in that knowledge of who Christ is and who God is. And so it's not just the people that are paid. It's not just the people that have the degrees or, have taken all of the check mark, okay, great, they are qualified to do this thing. Nope. We have all been transformed by the gospel. We have all been invited into light from darkness. And so we all have opportunity to be able to then bring people along in that. I think one of the other things that you said, I'm trying to go back to it, is that there's also this idea of that if you're journeying together, it's not it's not putting all of the pressure on the one that is leading, you're walking together. So I think what I want to do and what I love about, I think, our friendship is how it just kind of organically happened. And so it wasn't okay, let me find another woman, another pastor's wife, another leader. And to be frank, I think there was also, from my vantage point, just feeling where are the women that are wired like me? Where are the women that understand maybe some of these different hats and these different roles that I've had to kind of play into? And so honestly, just praying God, I know and I long for that relationship, and for somebody just to understand some of the intricacies and hardships and challenges that maybe come with the different places that I serve and lead. And so God answering that, not in an official, okay, here's an email from some random woman, a couple hours away, but just how it naturally kind of organically, we were kind of serving together on some different things, and then how that grew into the relationship that we have today. So maybe let's kind of talk about, how did it start? So we've got listeners that are very much in your life stage, my life stage. I think everybody's longing for it. How do we find these people? How do we, how do we find these women that it doesn't feel awkward, to where it's hey, I'm looking for a mentor. Can you be the Yoda of my life? Where do they, is there a club? Is there an Instagram group? Where does this happen?
I wish there was a club or an Instagram group. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe that should never exist, but it seems like that would make it easier.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that would make it more difficult. For you and I, so we may have different stories on how our relationship began. But to me, we were a part of this same network. And so we were just meeting online with several other people. And there was something about you that just like drew my heart. Like, I really want to know her more. And like, really, that's where, like for me, it started. Like, there was something within me that I just wanted to know, not with any intention of, I want to mentor this person. It was just like, your heart, you're passionate, you're genuine, you're sincere, you're wanting to lead. You're about God's word. You love women. Like, there were those things that were there that was a draw. But I will say this, there had to be some kind of initiation. Like, there had to be something initiated. And I don't remember if we had a phone call. Like, I want to say we had a phone call. Maybe we talked. I really don't remember. Do you?
Nope. Don't remember.
Nope. Okay. I do remember that you invited me to come and speak at your church. Yeah. And I do remember walking in your front door of your church, and we met. That was the first time we met, like face to face. Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, that was weird. No, I don't remember. I don't even know that I want to know what I said. What did I say?
You said, I'm going to give you a hug, and it may be long and awkward, but I'm going to give you a hug. Like, it was just like, okay, but here's the point. Here's the point is there has to be initiation.
Yeah.
These things do not just magically happen. And it cannot be that forced, hey, I'm going to mentor you kind of thing. And yeah, there are some people who say, hey, will you mentor me? But even then, I'm very careful to meet with this person, maybe for coffee. Like, you're really just, you're finding, is there a mutuality here? Mm-hmm. Is there even a reciprocity? Is there a space where we can build safety and accountability? Like, all of these things have to exist first before those places of, I call it inquiry, where maybe you're coming to me or maybe I'm coming to you, because we do have a very reciprocal kind of relationship here. And maybe there's some kind of situation, and I could take a shovel and I could dig up the answer for you and say, here you go, which I think a lot of people think that's what mentoring is. I just give you the answers. Rather, because of experience, I know that there are times I need to hand you the shovel. Mm-hmm. And by asking you a question or two or three, let you now begin to do the digging. Mm-hmm. And so I think you asked the question, where do we find these kinds of relationships? Listen, if there's someone in your life, younger or older, it needs to go both ways. Mm-hmm. Like, just initiate a time to get together, or two or three or four. I know that there are systems of aligning people and assigning people to mentoring kind of relationships, and I'm not necessarily opposed to those, but I am all for the more organic, very intentional kinds of mentoring, discipling relationships that get created. I think that when there's vulnerability, that then creates the intimacy, which then can be lead to the accountability. And also, ultimately, that person then learns how to mentor someone else too.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think even looking back, there were those just kind of practical, like, I knew you were a pastor's wife. I knew that you had led in different organizations. And so there was already kind of, I don't want to say pedigree, but like, there was already this knowledge that you were a leader, that you were similar in a lot of roles and things that I was also serving in as a younger person, kind of coming behind you. But honestly, I think one of the biggest things, and again, I don't remember if it was like a phone call kind of around you coming or even after that, but I think there was this turn for me to where we were having some kind of conversation, and then you started to share just some of the hard that you were walking through as a leader. And it was like, whoa, okay, you're not somebody that's just going to tell me what to do. You're not somebody that's just going to, like kind of dictate like, okay, you need to do this step first and then do this after this, and then evaluate. Like, it wasn't a to-do, which I feel like I could find all over the place, like there's bukus of leadership development things out there. But for somebody to be able to be a little bit ahead of me and show me that they're still struggling as a leader, like they don't have it all figured out. So I think just that humility, and then also that willingness to let me walk alongside you, even in that hard season, kind of right off. And so it's that whole vulnerability and trust thing, and being able to really kind of open up to, all right, this is life and this is where I'm at, and I don't have everything figured out. And so for me, that was almost the invitation of like, all right, I want this. Like, I need this in my life, to where we're able to kind of walk alongside one another and sharpen one another and remind one another and call out one another. I mean, like all of the things. And so I think where this kind of gets stuck is that it's not that mutual relationship like you talked about. And so Lord knows there have been so many times where both of us have hopped our Marco and it's like, all right, I'm quitting today. Like, I'm done. And like just last week, like I'm done. And so there's this beautiful thing that I think happens when you're not trying to have the right answer, or you're not trying to be the one to carry the torch for the other, but you are the one that is willing to sit in the trench. You are the one that's willing to pray and hurt with one another and those kind of things. And so I think whether you want to call it a mentor relationship, a discipleship relationship, or just a friendship, like those are things that really create some of those soul bonds and that allows you to keep going, especially in hard leadership seasons.
Mm-hmm. I know we're talking about leadership specifically, but because the audience is women, I know that there's other categories too, like being a mom in our marriage, being single, like there's, and we could probably continue to go on. You can even parse those apart with a mom, that's got an adopted child or a learning disabled child, or someone who's single, but they are so because they've been divorced. Like there's all kinds of different subcategories, right? And the thing is we all teach, preach, and even say we repost on Instagram memes that have to do with we are better together. We are created for community, like all of these things. But if we're not careful, what we do is we say this message, we're created for community, but yet we live very independently. Mm-hmm. I think our culture is very much wired that way. But like, I'm thinking about my own like daughter-in-laws, my own daughter. They're both, I've got one in a mom phase, but my daughter's in mom phase. I have a daughter-in-law in a mom phase. And they're both just trying to figure it all out. And I don't need to tell them, like, they're actually doing some things. And I'm like, why didn't I think about that as a mom? But there are also other times that I just need to come alongside them, support and encourage and affirm. Like they're literally questioning, am I being a good mom? How long is this going to last? I feel like I'm failing. I want to quit, like you said. And so like there are all of these different avenues that we really need to stop living independently in somehow even in fear, and start actually practically living in that community that we preach about all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think there's also this sweetness, but then it also stings a little bit. So I don't want to make it out like it's just like all rosy, but there are times where I think for both of us, where we've called one another out and been like, hey, Lori, I don't think you're thinking through this like correctly. Like I think you're kind of spiraling, or you're allowing the emotion of things. And then the same thing with me. I mean, you're like, no, like this is happening over here and you're honing in on this one thing that you don't need to be honing in on. And so I think there's also those moments, and I almost want to speak specifically to maybe my generation and younger, that it's good to be called out on things with love. And so I think there are elements to where, and I don't know if it's culture, I don't know if it's just like we're also beat down. And so we're just grasping for any kind of positivity to come at us, because we feel so inferior. But like we've almost shied away from, well, if you're speaking against me, or if you're calling something out in me that you're seeing, then surely this isn't of God, because God loves me and I'm his princess, and, whatever all of that junk is. And so, yeah, I just said that on air. Sorry. But there is a lot of good, healthy growth that happens in that friction, and that even like there's specifically one time to where I think I was complaining about something, and then you went off and shared some story about Africa and stuff. I'm like, well, crap, like how am I going to beat that? Like, duh, this is sin in my life, or this is a wrong perspective. And so I think I also want to, like, that encouragement piece is huge, so huge. And I know that you have been that, and hopefully me for you. But I also think that there is a goodness that we are not allowing to have happen very often in that sharpening piece, and inviting people in for that better together to say, hey, I think you're going down kind of a wrong path here, or I think that you're maybe seeing this, from like a selfish point of view, those kind of things. And we miss the sharpening opportunity. We miss being able to grow out of our comfort and allow God to use those moments as well. So I want to I love that. And I know you're a big cheerleader and you are so great at listening and encouraging and affirming. And I know that's been a big piece for me, but I also want to speak from the seat and say those moments where you're like, no, this isn't what the Lord has for you, and you're better than this. And almost even kind of calling me up out of my own junk. Like, no, this isn't what God has for you. I think we all need that. And there's been, moments that I've had to do that to you, and there's beauty in that. So I don't know. I'll let you respond.
Right. No, well, I mean, everything. Yeah, there's definitely, I think, has to be mutuality in that kind of relationship, which I think is very healthy and right. And you were speaking to your generation, like someone not calling me out on something or whatever. Let me speak to my generation, because sometimes the older that you get, you tend to look at things a little bit more opinionated, a little bit more cynical, a little bit more like you see someone doing something and it's almost like they're doing it differently than you, so you're offended because you think like they're communicating, well, your way was wrong, which is not necessarily always the case. And so we have to be careful that we're not speaking from, operating from, even the tone in which we use, the mindset which we approach something within church or in leadership, that our mindset isn't one of cynicism or there's only one way to do it. Rather, I think we can take both sides, your generation, my generation, and we can take where it says in Colossians, where we're to let the word of Christ dwell in us richly. Like that has to be layered and laced through all of our words, through all of our relationships, that the word, the gospel, the Bible, the word of Christ is dwelling in us richly. And if it's not, honestly, I'll just be straightforward. You probably shouldn't be discipling or mentoring someone. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, so that with all wisdom and you're teaching and admonishing one another. But first, there's that word of God kind of thing. So that comes in as you're teaching, that comes in as you're admonishing, that comes in this relationship that you and I have, that others need to have in all generations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And admonish there in the Greek is very different than rebuke. And so I think there is even a heart and a tone and a desire for the one that you are trying to push toward God. And so I think that's probably another podcast for another day. But anyway, okay. All right. We've talked about a lot. Mentoring. I don't know. I feel like it's a little redeemed. I can say it without wanting to vomit. So it's good. It's good.
I am so proud of you. That's awesome.
Oh gosh. All right. So this is episode 2. Make sure if you have not gone back, go and listen to episode 1 on why we need women in leadership. This one's on mentoring. Next week, we are going to tackle, this one I feel like is going to be a little bit painful. We're going to talk about serving and leading in positions where you're not paid, like you don't have a paycheck. A lot of lay leaders that are listening right now, a lot of women that are giving of their time and their gifts and their resources and all of the things. And technically, they're not getting any kind of monetary comeback. So we're going to talk about that and how we really kind of parse that out, not only in our own hearts, but then in our lives and, the whole jewels in heaven thing conversation. So let's do it next week. I hope you will join us for another episode and we will see you then.